as educational leaders with a global perspective, we recognize that learning and leading are intrinsically linked to the emotional and social dynamics present within every organization. Our research has shifted the focus from asking why to exploring how, prioritizing practical strategies that empower individuals to engage meaningfully with their workplace and community. By sharing our stories and proven practices, we emphasize the importance of social emotional leadership as the cornerstone for cultivating a sense of belonging among members of your workforce. Through intentional development of emotional intelligence and relationship building skills, individuals are equipped not only to thrive professionally, but also to enrich their personal lives. This approach encourages the formation of habits centered on active participation and ownership, transforming organizational culture and community engagement. By fostering emotional leadership, we pave the way for lasting change, where every member feels valued, connected, and capable of contributing to shared success. Welcome to Habit Over Why, episode 4. Today we're talking about how culture is everything. Good evening, Claudio. How you doing?
I'm good, Jeev. How are you?
Not too bad. A little tired. Went to work this morning, got back, fed the kids, put them to bed, and now we're at this again.
Good.
How about you?
Yeah, went for a walk, went to the driving range, mundane things, a little bit of research reading, and
Not
then
bad.
we're going to talk about culture. So I had to do a little bit of research on culture.
Definitely talk about culture. Okay, so today we're going to talk about culture here in organizations. We're going to try to focus on educational organizations, but this can work. What we're going to talk about is not just set to educational organizations. It could be any organization you're working in. Let's set up the problem here. So, Claudio, I'm a brand new principal walking into a brand new school. After observing for a couple weeks, we noticed that there's some factions of people vying for maybe power or things that weren't done before. Culture of the school is pretty good, but this one aspect is not moving. You're brand new, so you don't actually want to change everything at one time. But how do you set it up? What do you do? Why is culture important? So these are some of the things we'll be talking about today. What I want to do is start off with, and this is just hypothetical. This is how a lot of principals feel when they're coming into a new school, and we have to kind of figure out the system that we're working in. So, Claudio,
Yeah.
that's the situation. So, what do you do?
Yeah. So,
Where do you start? Why is culture important?
well, every organization has a culture to it. In fact, even within the organization that you work in, um, the school board culture is different than the school culture. And sometimes those compete based on personnel. Sometimes they compete based on values. Sometimes they compete based on other behavioral characteristics that are going on. But the culture are the norms that a group of people adhere to or apply to. And those cultural norms are different. And culture's not only a behavior, but it's also a feeling. I mean, I'm sure you've walked into a school and said, wow, this feels like really cold and distant. Or you've walked into a school and said, wow, this feels really warm. There's something about, the couch, the art, things
Yeah.
in the building that make you feel like you belong. And I think culture is a way of creating trust and belonging for the people within it. So, and every organization is uniquely different, and every school is uniquely different. So, um, I would
So,
say that that's what culture is.
so just to go over that again, is culture is trust and belonging. And then the feelings, once you feel people feel trusted and they feel like they belong, that's when you kind of get the good times.
Yeah. And, behavior and norms are what facilitate the culture as well. So when we talk about norms, we talk about, is that normal in your school? So do kids come to the office for help? Is that normal in your school? Do teachers have secret meetings in the parking lot? Is that normal in your school? And if that's a norm and a behavior, then there's something wrong if they're not actually coming to talk to you about things that you are trying to support them with. So every culture, every school, every organization has a different culture and a different organizational system. The
Okay.
values, the goals. Yeah,
So
that's
let's break that down for our audience. So values and norms. So when I come into a building, I guess the first thing is, I've always been taught, and I always do this, is I watch and see. Like you said, is there parking lot conversations going on? Are people coming to you to welcome you? Um, how are people interacting inside and outside the building? It could be recess supervision. It could be meetings at lunchtime. It could be interactions with parents. Now, as a new administrator or a new leader coming into an organization, what would you do? What would be the first steps for you to figure out what the norms are, or do some sort of what they call in organizational change management needs gap analysis? So a needs gap analysis is when you come into an organization, you could do it through a survey, you could do it through conversations, but what you're looking for is gaps um, in the services you want. It could be in values, it could be in culture, it could be in systems, it could be in processes. Um, but what you're looking for is those things, and you need a systematic way to kind of figure those things out. So, Claudia, when you walked into a new place, or when you walk into a new place, how do you figure those things out? What kind of methods do you use?
there's lots of methods that you use. I would say the first thing you need to do is in that needs assessment is actually not change anything and understand what works and what doesn't work in that organization. So how does that happen? Well, you have conversations with people. You talk to them about what do you like about the school? What do you dislike about the school? You make notes and you talk to the people in the organization. You talk to in a school, you talk to the custodian, you talk to the kids, you talk to the noon hour supervisors, you talk to all of the stakeholders in the organization, and you look for commonalities and trends. And then you look for things that are different and disassociated. And, we talked about in the previous episode, we talked about a values assessment that could be done. That might be something that you do. You might bring up a topic of your concern at a staff meeting or a small group discussion. And again, without being abrasive and making change right away, I think you always ask for clarity and want clarification. So you'd say, help me understand why we do this. Help me understand why we do that. Why? So that you
And
can get to the how. And
that
it
and
takes
that
time. It's something that just happens.
And the how is like when you're working the how, when you're having these conversations with custodians, teachers, EAs, parents, just the community, are you writing these down afterwards, or how are you recording that information so you don't forget the important information? Like, is there a system that you have?
My little book, I use a web-based program too. I take some PowerPoint notes, but I usually use a little notebook, and it's dated and time stamped. And I'll review it and I'll look for common trend words like, behaviors. What kinds of behaviors? Are they tardiness?
Yeah.
Let's take tardiness as an example. So you check the school registry with the secretary and you find out that 30% of your students are tardy 50%
Yeah.
of the time. So then you say to yourself, well, something in the culture that I don't like. I want to change that. How do I change that? Well, you change that by saying, why are kids coming late? Parents are busy people, maybe just, you know, can't get their kids up in time.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Well, what I did was I had a reminder. I sent a note out to parents and said, it's important for your kids to be at school on time. Make sure that you get them here on time. Not only is it good for you to get them here, but it's good for them to feel that they can be successful here on time and not miss any of the work that needs to be done. And if they need extra help, for whatever reason, then come and see me. And, maybe it's the drop off is too late. Can they come a little bit earlier and be housed in the gym to play drop in something or play on the playground with supervision? I think then you start looking at aspects of the hows based on the needs of that particular cultural norm. So we talked about ready, fire, aim last time. I think this is another situation where it's ready, fire, aim. And depending on what you're trying to do, what norm or what cultural aspect you're trying to address, then there's a series of strategies that you would focus in on. And again, I know that we're looking for the how specifically, but the how is contextually and content driven. So there's lots of hows, but you need to understand the context of the how too, because if you don't, then you could be misfiring all the time. And when it comes to staff, it depends on what it is. Is it that you have people that are doing things behind your back, looking for power and control and having secret meetings? Then that's something that you need to address with a formal conversation to the group and a look at psychological safety concerns, because obviously those people don't feel safe. So how are
Yeah.
you going to address those concerns? Well, that might be having a difficult conversation with one or two people saying, look, I understand that you have issues about power and control, and the previous leader was behaved in a different manner, but I'm not like that. I would like to be given the opportunity to try to resolve the problem before you escalate the problem and try to make it worse than it already is.
So let's want to circle back first to the tardiness. So lateness is, I think you hit on an important aspect there is in an organization is knowing who your stakeholders are, making sure, because the parents, I feel, are big stakeholders in the school. I mean, they have the kids there, but sometimes organizations are not communicating out to the right people. And so kudos to you, because I know working with you, you used to even have, and you instilled this in me, is having information centers out to parents, and you did that along with PAC. So one of the how-tos, I guess, would you agree, is to make sure when you're dealing with a situation that A, you're talking to all the stakeholders to figure out the why, but the how might be to reach out to the right stakeholders. Because if you keep it in house, things are not going to change. You need to get that message out to the community. Is that correct?
I would agree with that. I would also say that if we're talking about behaviors, a trust behavior that I would be displaying would be transparency.
Okay.
And I would be showing people that this is how I'm going to interact with you moving forward.
Okay.
So that you can now instill your trust in me to know that I'm actually going to communicate with you in a transparent way when things are needed or I need something to help shape the culture or shift the culture of the school for the betterment of everybody.
So what do you say to the leaders who, I agree with you. I think transparency is very important. You do need to do it with a little bit of finesse. Like I said, make sure that all the stakeholders have had input or had their voices heard or the opportunity to have their voices heard. Some people may not come forward in time. Maybe they're too busy or the topic didn't seem important to them, and that's fine. That's okay. But when you are, what do you say to the leaders who are scared to be transparent because they're scared that situations might go sideways? So how do you figure out as a leader which things to share and how to share them and which things to kind of hold back?
Well, that's, the
let's take tardiness. Let's say let's just
Yeah,
take your
well,
tardiness. So
so
you
a
come
district,
into a school where kids, disproportionate amount of students are late in the morning and they're missing the most important part of the day, which is the setup. You've got the information from the staff. You got a little bit of information from the community. Now you want to write, would you write something out to the community like you said, or would you do a, like I said, you used to do community report outs in schools where you took something that was particular to that school, out to the parents at that school, and you would do Zoom meetings or you would do team meetings with those parents and get their information.
yeah,
So
I think a leader should just, some things you can just act on. I think that's one of the things that you can just act on. If a parent dislikes it, or if the leader is afraid of the pushback from a parent about being tardy or late,
They
and then they,
say I'm a single parent, single dad, and I got two kids, and I'm depending on them to get ready in the morning while I'm doing cooking breakfast, but I just can't get them to work or get them to school. Sorry, I should say. And I've come to you and say, now you put me on the spot because you have all this stuff on your website, and you put this email out, and this is making me feel like I'm not doing my job as a parent.
well, again, I would offer supports and say, come a little bit earlier if that's a problem and you can't. Maybe you could find a walking buddy, someone that you can drop your kids off to.
Okay.
I mean, I think, that's where creativity and problem solving comes in, because what works for one parent might not work for another parent. And have I had parents come and talk to me and say, shame on you for telling me that I'm doing the best I can and my kids are getting to school late? Well, so how is it any different than you being late for work? If you're late for work every day, how is your boss responding to that? No different than me responding to you getting your kids to school on time. It's just a layer removed, but it's the same concept. So that's why I always say to you that the world revolves around simple principles. And there's an
Yes.
example of a simple principle that says tardiness is not good anywhere in life. And if you instill it in kids early on, they're going to continue to do that later in life. And you had a chance to shape that in a different way by getting them to school on time earlier and making some adaptations or shifts or changes to your own behavior. So don't pass responsibility and accountability to me and to your kids when you should be the person taking some of that responsibility. And that's a tough conversation for some people to
Very
hear or
difficult.
swallow,
Yeah.
but the truth hurts. And
Yep.
sometimes you have to tell the truth to people.
And I think it's also, you hit on another thing. Is one thing is we talked about form and function, right? So the form of what you're trying to do and the function has to fit. Sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay. Like, if I think, and this is where we might do things differently, and this is what I love about this podcast is, I might take that one-off parent, or maybe there's 6 or 7 that really struggle in the morning because they're single parents or something's happened, or maybe they have sick spouse at home and they're just unable to do it. Is say, you know what, for you, I get it. I get the form of what I'm doing is not fitting. So now I guess my conversation then would turn into, okay, how can I best support your child starting off on a good foot and not feeling like they're behind? Like, does that mean
Mhm.
you do the check in at the office in the morning? Do you say hello? I see how their night was going, and then you go from there. I don't want new leaders or leaders to think that, just because you report out and you have the data doesn't, there's still some flexibility in what you can do.
And, some of my thinking over the last little while has been around, you know, not only social emotional leadership, but social emotional thinking. And I
Yep.
think that we need to think differently around how we support people, how we lead people, but how we do that ourselves as well. Do we model it? Do we just give it lip service? Or, what actions, how am I actually showing that I
Yep.
am trying to interact differently, behave differently, show responsibility and accountability in my everyday life as well as my life as a servant or a leader?
Definitely, yeah. So that's just, I mean, we're talking about engaging one stakeholder, which is the parent. I think that was a great example of how to create a culture. Like you said, you know what? Maybe the form of what we're doing is not fitting, but here is the message that I want your child to have is later on in life, you know, we got to figure out ways to be on time for things. This is one of those circumstances, and I had an open conversation maybe with your parent, and the parent can be there about, and we understand what's going on in the morning. And what we're doing is we're doing our best, and you know, in the future, if you have situations, you can also be transparent yourself. And this is a good lesson for students when you get older, like saying, "Hey, this is what's going on. Here's the situation." That way, the people at work for you will kind of be able to accommodate what's going on with you. So great example of creating a good culture with parents. Now, I want to move on to the next one, which was difficult conversations. So you're talking about difficult conversations with staff when you
So
come in to say, so now you've done a needs assessment, like you said, it could be, I know that you gave a actual survey to the staff. It could be through just the conversations that you're having, but you know, you've recorded the data and you look it over to see if there's any common themes and patterns. So that's the how to is you're looking for common themes and patterns and things that are coming up. And now you have to have some difficult conversations with some people. So again, hypothetical. So now you're at the point where you have an employee, a couple of employees or an employee, or maybe a group of employees that are just not meshing or creating a culture of negativity. So how do you broach that? How do you go about having those difficult conversations, or what do you do?
well, I think, you know, for me, and we've talked about this, that the semantics of language is really important. So I have to have everybody on board so that they understand what the culture is, whether it's a phrase or a slogan or some meaningful piece of information that we use to monitor ourselves on a regular basis. And I think culture has four aspects to it. The first is identify, the second piece is build, the third piece is create, and then the fourth piece is brand. And in that process, if people don't want to be part of the brand, then you're going to have conversations with them about why they do not want to be part of the brand. And I think you come up with a language that is important for those people. And you talk about character, you talk about solidarity, you talk about sociability, you talk about achievement, and you talk about role, and you talk about support. And each of those has a specific orientation, and you can define those with those people that don't want to be on board with the culture that you're trying to impose. And I wouldn't say impose because I think, you know, the culture is already there, but you're just trying to make it a little bit better. And what does that look like? Well, maybe it means to the staff, I want you to be to the staff meetings on time.
Mhm.
You can't be late to staff meetings because some people will take advantage of it and say, I don't want to go and I don't need to go, so I'll go 15 minutes late. Well, that means you have to have a tough conversation. Or you notice that the pattern is that there's a teacher or someone that's having poor reviews or issues with parents on a more regular basis than other people. Well, you have to bring that to that person's attention and say, you know, what's been brought to my attention is, you know, how are you doing with all of these issues that are going on? And I think giving people the opportunity to give you some feedback and for allowing them to reflect on what that looks like, I think guides the next phase or step of the conversation, the relationship that you're trying to foster with those people within the
Okay.
cultural norms that you're creating and you want to foster and establish. And I think we all want to belong. We all want to be trusted. And if you don't want those things, then shame on you. You may as well go work somewhere else. And maybe that's what the conversation leads to is this is the wrong place for you that you don't fit in here. Maybe you need to go and find another place with a different kind of culture and move on and just do a better job of being yourself
Yeah.
and allowing people to see that, or getting them to find out that this is the wrong place for them and they should just move on.
Okay. So that's a big one. I mean, I have not had to have that conversation with any employee right now about because working in a unionized atmosphere, it's different than working in private sector because private sector, you can have a performance review and be like, hey, I could imagine is, these things are not aligning. I know I heard one thing is, um, it's all, I would rather hire over relationships. What I mean is people that can build relationships and communicate clearly rather than having excessive skills because skills can be taught where relationships and communicating with others, creating others is so subjective to people's lived experiences.
So what you just said is brought up by a couple of researchers where they talk about character over genius, where they want people with character versus people that are just bright and have
Yeah.
no character at all. And it's becoming more of a HR issue where people are starting to now be hired for character over genius. And Ethan Koss and I want to say Amy Edmondson in their books speak to that specific thing.
Okay.
And there's another fellow, his name is Edgar Schein, and he is an organizational, cultural, and management leader. And he
Yeah.
talks about 10 things for a flourishing culture. And I'm going to rattle them off right now. And the
Sure.
first one
Let's do
is
it.
common goal orientation, social responsibility to the group,
Okay.
common beliefs, attitudes, and values, independent and transparent governance, participative leadership, entrepreneurial and autonomous behavior, continuity in leadership, ability to adapt and integrate, customer orientation, and stakeholder value orientation. Now, we could talk about those things from a school perspective, but we could also talk about those things from a business or an organizational perspective. And they all basically do the same thing. It's just that their bottom line is different for each of those contexts.
Okay. So I think what was the name of the authors and the book or the author in the
Edgar
book?
Schein,
Okay. Edgar Schein.
and the book is called Organizational Culture and Leadership. And the other one is Ethan Koss. I can't remember the name of that book. I want to say, and then the one by Amy Edmondson is called Teaming, a New Way
Yeah.
of Organizing Groups.
Sounds good. So if you want to learn about those characteristics, those are 3 books that you can go to learn about that. We have to be cognizant of time here. So we talked about how to create some culture through doing needs gap analysis, which is kind of seeing what the needs of the organization are. You can do that through surveys. You can do that through general conversations. Just make sure that you have a journal or somewhere where you're recording that information that you can recall it a little bit later. Once you have that, then you may have to go into things like having difficult conversations, whether it's with outside stakeholders or inside stakeholders. If it is employees that you're having difficult conversations, make sure that you're clear with them. Make sure that it's when you are having these conversations, Claudio, you would talk about value based first and then asking curious questions on how and why the person may be acting and what they're thinking about. And then from there, you need to circle back to the vision or the values that you see that the organization needs or the group has decided on. So
Now,
I
I'm going
think,
to ask,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask you a question. We talk about values-based behavioral conversations,
Yes,
and we do that so that it doesn't feel like the person is being attacked personally themselves.
definitely.
So if you talk about the values, then it's really not about the person, it's about the situation and the context.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And you know what? Some people I know in working at schools, every school has a history, and some people have been part of that history a lot longer. So there might be some scars there that you need to talk about that have gone on. Like you said, it's some of them is just realigning it towards a group values um, that you need to be transparent and clear about. Everybody needs to know what the values are. So sometimes when you walk into a place, it has been, and I'm going to use this word, is chaotic for a while, and they just need someone to kind of realign. And like I said, that's where your best friends are having conversations, doing surveys. I remember working at a school, and this is just serendipity, is I had to put on a weekend, I had to put on a professional development day on social emotional learning. Well, boy, did that professional development turn into, hey, what are the challenges going on for this school? And I was able to, and this is another how for new leaders and existing leaders, is where schools are unique, and and working within a union atmosphere is we need to be make sure that everybody's voice is heard. And I don't think that's unique to schools now. I think all organizations, everybody wants to be heard in some way or another. There are those people that love to be heard by talking out in meetings, and some of them talk a lot more than others. And then there's others that are a little bit quieter, and they never get a chance. So what I did was at this meeting is I put chart paper up on the walls, um, and then we went through challenges that way. So I had them in groups, but I also took a break and printed out and got smaller sheets so people at the table could individually put what they think are the challenges. So with those smaller sheets, everybody was able to communicate something and then talk as table talk. And then we transposed some of that stuff onto the bigger sheets. I collected everything because I took into consideration that some people are just not speakers. They're introverts and they don't want to speak. So that was serendipity. And you know what? It actually talking about the challenges, you could see what the values were. And I brought up the values in the next staff meeting. I said, hey, here's the challenges that you said. Here's some long term, here's some midterm, here's some stuff that we can do right away. But what also stood out were some of the group's core values, which we talked about. Student safety was number one. Safety for students and staff was number two. And so those are great conversations to have. So values and getting people's individual values and also group values is very important, and using those as guiding principles, using them as a compass, we would say, right, Claudio?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So parting thoughts. So we've kind of discussed having difficult conversations. We've talked needs gap analysis. We've talked about a few other things that new leaders and current leaders could use. Parting thoughts on culture is everything. When you hear those words, what comes to mind?
Yeah, don't go in and change culture immediately. Understand what the existing culture is, because there's some good pieces to it and you want to keep those. And there are some things that probably need to be changed. And those are the things where you should put your energy into. And as we talk over and over and over again, organizations are about people. People are about relationships and emotions, and trust and belonging are key to fostering positive change in the environments that we work in when it comes to making it a better place. That's my parting thought.
And I think my parting words are exactly what you were going to say, what you said about trust and belonging is to create trust and belonging. You have to be able to sit back, like you said. Don't go in full force and say, I need to change this, I need to change that, because that's not building culture. That's building your culture. That's not building their culture. The organization is a living organism, I like to say, and everybody should have a voice. And make sure that once that voice is heard, that you are aligning it with a common vision and that you have some core values that you can always come back to. Therefore, it's easier for people to conceptualize and work with it. So that's our episode number 4. So we're almost at half a dozen here. I think we're getting a little bit better at this, Claudio. I don't know about you, but it was great. Remember, we are on YouTube. It's Habit Over Why on YouTube at Habit Over Why. We're also on Spotify now. Claudio has been working relentlessly to get those up, and we hope to see you there. Leave comments, leave questions. I know I'm thinking maybe there's a part 2 coming out of this sometime soon, but we want to thank you. And if you think that this information we've given you is important enough to listen to our podcast, send it to a friend, send it to a family member, and help them out too. So this is myself, Jeevan Desange, signing off. Claudio?
See you, everyone. To hear from you at habitoverwhy@gmail.com. Bye for now.
Take care.
How do you lead? Are you passionate about growing strong, resilient leaders who value empathy, self-awareness, and community? Our podcast, Habit Over Why, a look at social emotional leadership, is dedicated to exploring the transformative power of emotional intelligence in leadership. We bring insightful conversations, compelling stories, and practical strategies to help individuals and organizations thrive in today's dynamic world. By sponsoring our podcast, you'll be supporting thoughtful dialogue and empowering listeners to become mindful, compassionate leaders. Your partnership allows us to reach a wider audience, feature industry experts, and deliver actionable content that makes a real difference. Together, let's build a future where social emotional skills are at the heart of leadership. Join us on this important journey. For sponsorship details and opportunities, please contact us at habitoverwhy@gmail.com. Let's inspire the next generation of leaders, one episode at a time.